Good morning. Welcome in to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It is our Wednesday morning. Look, I call this Portal or Pro Day. This is the deadline, May 29th, 11:59 p.m. It is the deadline for players who are in the draft process, who still have their college eligibility remaining. If they decide or elect to come back to school, they have to withdraw today. This is deadline day. So much later today, at a minute before midnight is the final, I guess, opportunity for such players to get back to announce that they're going to come back to school and formally withdraw from the draft. So, having said that, Arkansas now with 8 scholarship players. John Calipari's been talking for a while now about 8 or 9. It's going to be 8 or 9. So he's hit. I don't think he stops there. And we've talked a lot about what Arkansas probably still needs. It doesn't mean that's what they'll get, but I think a frontline piece, and there's plenty of frontline guys to talk about, especially with this portal or pro decision. Some of those decisions have been made in the last 24 hours on guys that we're going to talk about, but some remain. And so we're going to get into that. By the way, thank you for joining us again. Early morning segment. We're not going to rush this and do the old 5 and 5 that I started doing a couple of weeks ago. It's just too much to talk about, and I don't want to try. I can't make it 5 minutes anyway, and I don't want to shortchange the discussion. So just a forewarning for those who like the brief ones. We're not going to have one of those today. Appreciate you joining me again. And if you haven't already, I like to say it at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end, please go hit subscribe, like, share, whatever benefits us and helps content. I do have some, I will call it a bit of source information, maybe not anything devastatingly breaking, good or bad, but just some updates on some stuff. But again, today's the deadline. I look at a guy like Coleman Hawkins, 6'10" forward out of Illinois, a guy that's played 4 years of college, went through the NBA draft combine process, kind of got mixed reviews there. His final day in the last scrimmage he played in, he had a good game. I think post game they named him player of the game, and he's been going through a process of meeting individually with teams. Knicks, Sacramento Kings, Golden State Warriors. Those are 3 of them. There may be more, but he's done that. He has talked about when he was at the pro draft combine, the NBA draft combine, he was talking about D10 likely to stay in the draft. 90% chance he stays in the draft. Source I talked to last night who spoke with him during the combine said he told him he's not coming back to school. He said, I'm not going back to college. That was during the draft combine process. Someone who is not only familiar with Coleman Hawkins, but is part of his decision process, especially trying to help him get things going with the pro career, told me just a few days ago, this last week, toward the end of the week, I think it was, it's been a few days, that it was 75-25. So, is there a trend there that it's moving toward coming back to school? The same source I talked to last night who said during the draft that Coleman Hawkins told him he was not going back to school. He goes, look, Kevin, he said, players wants to go pro. They're going to say that. They're trying to convince NBA teams that they're ready for it. And he probably believes he's ready for it. He goes, but the teams and the feedback are so often what dictate players coming back to school now. He goes, especially if there's good NIL money. He says, if a guy like Coleman Hawkins is staring down a 2-way deal, he's leaving a lot of money on the table for a year on a potential NIL deal. Arkansas program could deliver. We know that. And so I'm not certain, despite the statistics that we were given on odds that he's going to stay in. Maybe he does stay in. Maybe he stays in. Maybe one of these team workouts in the last few days has garnered what he's really looking for. What he's looking for is a draft guarantee and a guarantee beyond a 2-way deal. I think he's looking for a guaranteed contract, and then typically on those you're looking for 2 years of guaranteed money. Makes sense that he would explore those options. He has said he wants a guarantee without elaborating a lot, but that's what it's got to be, because he can probably get a 2-way guarantee. There's 30 teams. Each team has 3 2-way slots they can give out 2-way contracts. That's a lot. He's good enough to get one of those. So we'll see if that's enough to keep him in, or if he believes he's going to get drafted, or if he's just done with school. What are the options? We've been told Coleman Hawkins, Arkansas, is at the top of his list. He is a versatile 4 who can play the 5. And so you like that versatility, especially what I consider to be a shallow front line at Arkansas with 8 players. Two of those are true big men. Another one is a tweener, 3-4 combo, and a Adu Thero. The two bigs, obviously, Jonas Adu and Big Z. So now you're talking about, well, who else can you get? Coleman Hawkins would be, in my best fit, with a lot of talent and upside. Uh, even though he's a known commodity, he had his best year last night at Illinois, and maybe a change of scenery and a new opportunity in college, one more run, could spark his game even more and bring more success not only for him. Had a good year last year, both the team and Coleman Hawkins. So it's just one of those situations. Does he stay in? The other thing is, if he does decide to come back to college, Arkansas is in competition with the schools like North Carolina, potentially Illinois. I mean, Illinois has added players that are frontline guys, and he's talked about, be selfish of me to expect to come back, and it wouldn't be the right. But you just never know. If a guy's thinking he's going to go pro, he's saying a lot of different things about why he will remain pro. But if something pushes him back, maybe even Illinois would be a possibility. I wouldn't completely rule that out. Or somebody else some other school that needs a big man. So when the comments roll up, I'm going to try to do a better job of getting to those today. They come on so quick and on the format I have here, and by the time I get close enough to read them, they're fading off. So Coleman Hawkins to me is the top available guy if he's truly going to be available, if that happens. Again, everything we've heard from him and a couple of my sources that I brought to you, by the way, are that he's more than likely staying in. But again, I just wonder at some point, it's kind of like in politics where politicians say they're sticking in for the long haul, they're not going anywhere. And then at some point, a decision has to be made to get out to save their political future, maybe. So I'm not going to go diving deep into politics, but you get the point. Sometimes you run out of space. And the options aren't really what you were hoping you'd get to, or you're betting on yourself, you're believing I'm going to make it happen. So I'm not saying that's the case here. I'm saying it might end up being the case here where he comes back to school. Maybe he stays in. And I've spent the first 7.5 minutes talking about a guy that we'll find out later today is just going to stay in the draft. But I think it's more than the door's cracked, in my opinion, that he would come back. It may not be a big opening, but it's big. Trolling on Twitter. Yeah, he's done a lot of stuff on Twitter. There was, I think, something yesterday. Someone noticed that he put out a photo of him in a Marquette uniform, like a Marquette visit, and then deleted it. And then someone got a snapshot of it, retweeted it, and it looks like maybe a visit he took when he was, I don't know, coming out of high school or something. He looked young. You can't really tell, but who knows? I don't know. The guy likes to play the social media game. He's a talker. He likes attention. This may be one of those things where we hear what Coleman Hawkins. This may be the last decision we hear about today. Maybe it's early, but it could be. I wouldn't put it past him to wait till 11:59 to put out a social media announcement. Who knows? But I think Arkansas could very well be in the mix if he decides to return to school. Marquette in Nevada from high school, yeah. So I mean, he's having fun with it. Last year Jordan Walsh, I think he waited till the last minute to make his announcement public. He may have been the last one off the board, or one of a handful. I think he might have been the last one last year. So we've seen it before. He trolled UK also. Yeah. So North Carolina, Brazile. I'm going to talk about Trevon Brazile. That's actually the second name I have on here. Let's just jump to it. Before we do that, just real quick on Coleman Hawkins. Versatile guy. I mentioned he can play the 4 or 5. He can pass. He can handle a little bit. He can shoot the 3. We've seen him play against Arkansas 2 years ago. Not a great game, but he did some good things in that game in the NCAA tournament. But a guy that got a lot better, I thought, last year. More consistent. Double-figure score. Not the biggest rebounder, but still, I mean, everything he brings to the table, and because of the versatility at the 4-5 and being interchangeable there, then you're not as worried about Arkansas adding a 5th front court piece. You'd feel good with the 4. And so there's that. All right. A similar conversation about Trevon Brazile. Now, this is interesting. I just don't know. I have not gotten a sense at all that Calipari, since he came on board, was interested in retaining any of the players who at the time was basically everybody in the portal who hadn't already wrapped up their college eligibility. Everybody else went into the portal or were going into the portal. Brazile was a kind of a late announcement. He also was going in the NBA draft. beat the deadline to get in the portal. And based on the NBA scout I talked to last night, he said that Brazile's making the right decision. He said, this was a guy that back in October looked like a potential lottery pick. His season was a disaster, not just because of injuries, just some things he needs to work on. And he's actually, because of all his measurables and some of the athletic stuff that he brings to the table, he's got a chance to actually improve to potentially to a first round pick. Even for a guy who's older, when you look at how many years he spent in college, because he's got a small body of work. He has been injury prone. I think the pros want to see, can he get through a season healthy, and can he be consistent? And it may improve his stock enough to be a first rounder. Okay, this feedback I got from this scout was, he goes, the perfect place for him, the perfect place is at Arkansas. Now, this is a scout that knows all the coaches and all the college coaches. All these people know each other. They're connected. And he thinks Arkansas is the best place for him. He said, look, they need forward. He's versatile. He can play a 4 or 5. Brazile is a stretch 4, but at 6'10", 6'9", 6'10", with all that length, 7'4" wingspan, he's a guy that in a pinch, if you needed him to play a 5 or in a small ball lineup, where you're space and everything, and maybe even considering playing 5 out, he's perfect for those kind of scenarios. He's got familiarity with Arkansas because he's been on campus for the last 2 years. There are some positives. You don't have to, search high and low to get a player that is not just a body. This guy was, preseason All SEC pick, first team, for good reasons. He's had big games at Arkansas in both his short stints, I guess we'll call it, in 2 seasons. There are a lot of reasons to say this is not a great idea. Calipari, to me, basically is like, this is my program. I need to get who I need to fit me, what makes sense for me. And part of that may not be the quality of the player as much as trying to move on from let's face it, the previous regime, the way things ended, there was a lot of stuff that was beyond not good. On the court and off the court. And so sometimes you just need a clean break. Not that you're laying all that at the feet of Trevon Brazile, or even some of it, most of it, a little bit. That's not what plays into it. It's just, it's best everybody move on. And it may be the best thing for Trevon Brazile, and it may be what he wants. But I thought it was interesting that the scout thought that Brazile would be perfect for what Arkansas doesn't have, could still use, and because of the potential and quality of the player. Just throwing out what one person said, not saying I fully buy into that, but there was some really good points. And this is one of my better go-tos for information and those kinds of things. In fact, it's the person that told me that, can go ahead and when we reported over 2 weeks ago that DJ Wagner was committed, it was this source. So he was telling me he committed on that Saturday on May 11th to the staff. And so, look, we'll see. I mean, does Trevon Brazile make sense? In a lot of ways he does. Do I think it's going to happen? I think it's still a long shot. Well, there's not a lot left on the board. How much of a long shot could be if you're determined to have a quality 4? And then you begin into these debates. Well, is he quality? I think he is if he's healthy, and maybe a change of coaching staff would help. There's also the idea that USC could be in play now that he's coming back to school. This announcement just came down. Could Eric Mossman convince him to go out to Los Angeles and have a reboot out there with him there? Putting different new players around him. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure if Muss is filled up, he'd find a way to make it work. He did that at Arkansas. Mossman was one of those guys that did not bat an eye about filling up his roster if he could, and he's only going to play 7 or 8, but that doesn't matter. He'll go and tell everybody, come on, I got a spot for you and I got a role for you, and whether they actually get a role or not, we saw how that played out too often. But Arkansas had great success in his formula until last year. Maybe part of the year before that, there was stuff that was starting to rear its head a bit in league play. But getting back to Brazile, could USC be a landing spot? Could North Carolina be one? North Carolina is still, they added Vin Allen Lubin. I think they want another frontline piece. And I'm looking around, Ugana Onyenso, who has not made an announcement. He's in the NBA draft. He went is going through that process. Announcement likely today. I mean, has to be today, right? We have to find something out today. So likely, forget that. It will come at some point. Is he back in? If he's back in, then North Carolina's got a Onyenso, Coleman Hawkins, and maybe a Brazile. Arkansas's got options here. I just mentioned Onyenso. He played for Cal at Kentucky. Now, it doesn't seem likely. He doesn't add anything to your front line other than a third quality body, but he's so similar to Big Z and Jonas Adu in terms of what he brings to the table. It doesn't make a ton of sense. That's not to say there's not some pathway for it to happen. I just think it's very unlikely. You haven't heard much in any way, shape, or form that might happen. I just don't think it will. I've had him in my recruiting tracker only because I was keeping a tab on the Kentucky transfers who are in the portal because several of them came to Arkansas, and I just left his name in there, not because I thought he was a real possibility, but just because. So having said that, he's important because if he comes back to school, it adds one more available player that if he fills a spot somewhere else, then that may open something up for Arkansas. Not that Arkansas is waiting on anybody else to get in line. Calipari doesn't get in line. He goes after what he wants. And I still think there's some scenario on what's after today that will make a little better sense for all of us at some point in terms of some decisions Arkansas made and saying no thank you to a couple of frontline pieces. And it may be that Arkansas, when you looked at Igor Demon, who committed to BYU, we'll talk about that, a perimeter player, the 6'8" combo guard out of Russia, Arkansas was in pursuit there. So Arkansas, if you're going to fill up at 9, wasn't necessarily looking for a front court or a true forward, 4. If Igor Demon was in play and you're capping at 9, then to me, Calipari's looking for the best players out there, and he understands that he's not going to go beyond 8 or 9 guys in this rotation. His 2 deep, and so he's going to figure out a way to make it work. Not in a way where it's a stretch to make it work, where he really sees viable pathways, and he's not just locked into one idea. To me, the biggest idea, it's not one, but it's the biggest one, would be to add another forward. I just think Arkansas really needs to get there. But a perimeter shooter with length and size who could be a small ball 4, that's also a viable pathway to rounding out a 9 deep. We talked about Igor Dimon, now off the board. Who else is still out there? Well, Jackson Robinson. Maybe Arkansas is not a likely landing spot. Maybe he stays in the draft. We're going to find out about that today. Kentucky feels good about him. Maybe BYU, after getting Igor Dimon, tries to add another, keep him on campus. I mean, who else is out there? Would Arkansas, based on how other dominoes fall, make a hard run at him? But perimeter shooters, Will Riley, the class of 2025, 5-star, who's really heavily considering and very well may reclass to 2024. Calipari's the kind of guy that can make something like that happen. He likes that kind of thing. And so he's got visits set up for Kentucky, Alabama. He's already visited Arizona. And then he's telling folks, he told me he's going to visit Arkansas a bit later. Other reports say later in June, but then in theory, Arkansas could be the last visit. Or do they actually get the visit? The other option for him in his final 5 is playing in the NBL over in Australia, Pro League, for a year before the draft. So 6'8" shooter, highly skilled. He can dribble left or right, and I'm not saying just competently. He's really good at going left or right to create space and shots. He prefers going right. That's his strong hand, but he's a guy that can go either direction. And at 6'8", you really like to see his versatility offensively. He's got good length. He'd be a work in progress defensively, of course. But Will Riley would be another guy that is intriguing to me. Again, a guy I just saw over the weekend at Nike EYBL in Kansas City. All right, we're 19, almost 20 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Really, this is portal or pro day. Guys that are in the portal and in the NBA draft process and still haven't made an announcement either way. Today's the day where they've got to make that choice. And so we'll find out more. Does Arkansas move to add that 9th player? Calipari said 8 or 9. I was there in person when he was in Little Rock, and we had that media scrum before the the Razorback Roadshow event for fans, and he repeated what he had recently said, that look, I'm going to stay at 8 or 9. All right. Well, he's at 8. Could this be it? Well, summer session 1 started this week. I'm assuming the players are going that are up there. They've started moving in. They're going through physicals, getting ready for on court, the limited on court stuff and strength and conditioning work. They're limited to how much time they can do it, but they can do it. Now, Eric Patrick Musselman, EPM, he would get into that stuff week 1. I'm not sure if there's an exception to that. I think they always got into it at some point in the first week once summer 1 started. That's not to say Calipari is doing the same thing. We need to keep an eye on that and see if we see anything coming out of the social media from the practice facility. Maybe they delay it a little bit the way he does. I don't know the answer to that. That's something I'm interested to see. When do they start ramping up the actual on-court stuff? But having said that, you've got 8 guys. Are you going to backfill with walk-ons and have tryouts on campus? And I think there's more to come. In fact, I really think we're going to see more than 9. I think maybe the 9th guy is a guy that really, once you get him, that they are going to fit into a 2 deep and be really important to that. And then maybe others will be guys that could, potentially be developed for year 2, or at least help you get through practices and be a insurance policy against anything like injuries, illness. It's repetitive. We have these same talking points. Foul trouble within games. I mean, all these things matter. And I keep going back to that front line. I just feel like if you do make a hard stop at 9, I'd love to see a front line piece. If not that, then a perimeter player with length and shooting ability. Arthur Kaluma, does he decide to stay in the draft or come back? He's kind of been an up and down guy, but a former 5-star out of high school, a really talented player, 6'8", 6'7", 6'8", can stretch the floor, can shoot the 3. He's a strong rebounder for a guy that's a 3-4 tweener. He's a strong rebounder, 7.5 boards per game, I believe, last year at Kansas State, or started out at Creighton. He's a guy that what would he do? Would Arkansas be in play for him? Jameer Watkins, another name. When you look at Florida State, a player that visited Arkansas 2 years ago with Caleb Battle, was on the same visit. He committed. There was EPM told me he committed. Keep it quiet. Sit on it. They were trying to get out of the weekend, and then I get a call at the end of the week. Something blew up, and it wasn't going to happen. It was the strangest dynamics of what I was told. So I'm not going to go into that. Not now. I may do that later. But this stuff gets wild. Recruiting is wild, and process and results. People get hung up when we talk about what's going on in the process, and then when the results are a little bit different or not exactly, the messenger gets shot over and over again. But some of this stuff gets wild, and even the coaches get blindsided. That happens. John Calipari is a guy that he's the best in recruiting of all time. I keep talking about it. He has been for decades. Been in the game for decades, unlike an Eric Patrick Musselman, who's still working to get to do it, to complete a decade as a college head coach. So it's a different dynamic. Calipari, not only has he been the best, but he's been doing it so long. The way it's looked to me is when he's brought players on campus, it's basically a formality at that point. When they come to visit, they're not really seeking to win a commitment. They've basically gotten that in effect with the last part. Just get on campus, let's see each other face to face. Here's where you'll be playing. Because the behind the scene formalities, the procedural stuff I talk about is already done by that point. And it's just, it's been pretty much like clockwork. That's why the DJ Wagner thing taking a couple more weeks in terms of the public part of it. He's not even gone public that I've seen with any of his social media or anything. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't check this morning. But I don't think we've heard a word from him or seen anything even on social media from him. Typically, that's not the case. Even with Nellie Davis, when John Goodman came out and basically, I'd already told you guys he was privately committed, by the way. John Goodman, I think it was him that broke it, that he's, that it's, he made it public. And then it wasn't long after that Nellie Davis, at least on his Instagram, or maybe Instagram and Twitter, put out the Razor, that he was committed, or, was the Razorback uniform from when he was on campus secretly. It wasn't reported that he was there. So I bring that up to say the DJ Wagner deal, I was just waiting for him to, some way, however he wanted to do it, put something out, because I didn't want to splash it on the major social media like I've done for other players, whether that was Twitter, what the big platforms where everybody just then it goes viral. I kind of kept it to these segments on here, Drive Time Sports, places like that. I had it in my recruiting tracker. I just didn't blast it with big headlines, trying to respect the young man to get it out the way he wanted to. Well, it's out, but he still hasn't public. So not everything goes down the same way. And so when I say all this, today could be an interesting day as not only we hear about players staying in or coming back, how does that shift that'll obviously shift what's available. Matt Norlander said DJ told him that he won't be posting anything. I've read most of that. Yeah, so maybe DJ Wagner, Matt Norlander at CBS Sports, one of the best out there when you talk about college basketball reporting. Apparently, I've been talking to DJ Wagner and he's not posting anything. Okay, that's fine. I'm just saying, not every situation is what most of the situations now. The players want to be ahead of that stuff. There's no right or wrong, and so in that situation, it helps explain maybe why just at some point they wanted to get out there because summer session one started and so it trickled out. All right, so let's get back to some other stuff. Now, look, we've gone through some of these names. Jameer Watkins was the last one I talked about. Jalen Wells, by the way, the NBA scout told me last night, do not look for him to make an announcement to come back to school, that he believes he'll stay in the draft. Now, I don't know. I came on it around 7 a.m. I don't know if some of these things have been announced while I've been on here, but Jalen Wells is another name that's been out there, the Washington State. I think he was a Division II player, and what a season he had at Washington State. Been in the draft process, draft combine, but one of the guys that I think, what I'm told is he'll stay in the draft. So another name that was out there is that 3-4 tweener, maybe a guy that Arkansas would maybe look at, quality player. So there's another name out of the portal. And really, the only other name that's got any Arkansas, connection is Wooga Poplar, the 6'5" guard of Miami, also in the draft process, but he's already talking about taking visits. And so if he's talking about taking visits, that means that even though his maybe hasn't yet formally announced a stay or go decision, that it's just a formality that he's going to withdraw from the draft and return to school. It's thought that Villanova's in the running there. I think he's got a visit planned for Oregon sometime next week. Remember, it's a dead period through June 3rd. May 22nd through June 3rd. Dead period means no on-campus visits, no off-campus visits. Everything. The only thing you have are phone calls and texts and emails, but no visits on or off campus. And so he's going to start taking visits after June 3rd. And it looks like Oregon, from what I saw on Twitter from a reporter, was that Oregon would be one that he's got planned. It's also been said that Arkansas would be in the mix for a visit. He wants to visit Arkansas. Well, who knows? I mean, I don't have anything specific on that. I don't have a source on that. I don't have a date on something like that. I just know nobody can take visits until after June 3rd. All right. So having said that, Wooga Poplar at 6'5", a 38.5% three-point share last year on volume, a good player, had a really good season at Miami. And so to me, your backcourt to me is loaded once DJ Wagner, once we all knew, okay, it's official in terms of there's no waffling on that weekend commitment when he visited. So there was no waffling. He's a hog. You've got 5 deep in your backcourt. And if you want to count, Adu Thero, who I think because of the thin front line, is going to be a 4, basically a full-time 4, unless you add at least one more frontline piece. But he could also factor in on the 3, and he can guard all 3 backcourt positions. So he's versatile that way. So you've got a deep backcourt with guards and wings, especially if you count Thero among that group. But Wooga Poplar would be a good player. It's an experienced player. He was on that Miami team that went to a Final Four 2 years ago, the same final year that Florida Atlantic went to Final Four with Nellie Davis. And then you've also got Jonas Adu, who's been to an Elite 8 last year and helped Tennessee as an All-SEC performer, All-SEC defensive player, helped Tennessee to the SEC title. So Awuga Poplar would check more boxes for you. It'd give you depth. It'd give you perimeter shooting. I think a lot of people are wondering where is that going to be. But look, we're talking about, we talked so much about experience and portal. And one of the things I just keep going back to, let's not forget that John Calipari brought in 3 5-star high school players. 2 were McDonald's All-American. Carter Knox, the guy that I continue to see pop up in first round mock drafts for 2025. Boogie Fland, I think, is going to be an outstanding lead guard in combination with DJ Wagner. And even Billy Richmond, I think, has got a chance to be just a special player. When we talk defensively, he's got the potential to be an elite defender. But all these guys are going to play. Well, I think at least 2 of them are going to have heavy roles, and likely all 3 will have roles. Meaning, it's not just going to be a situation where, and it could be. I could be wrong about this, but I think all of these guys are going to plug in, especially if Calipari keeps it at 9. If he truly stays at 9, guys, I don't see a way that all 3 aren't plugged in and playing. But guys like Boogie Fland and Carter Knox, to me, I think they're going to be. I think we'll see what they are shooting from 3, but I think they're going to score, and I think they're going to stretch defenses because of their skill set, their talent, and their skill sets. And I think 3-point shooting will be part of that. Nelly Davis, a 41+% 3-point shooter last season. Even Big Z can step out and knock down some threes. Let's see in a very small sample size, but the percentages were fine. I'm not saying he's going to be a guy you rely on as a 3-point shooter. I'm just saying, when you cobble it all together, I mean, Jalen Williams wasn't a high percentage guy from 3 for Arkansas, but he was competent and he made some big ones. And he was a really good decision maker with the ball out front. And I think guys like Jonas Adu, because of experience and the way he understands how to play an opportunistic offensive game where he's maybe scoring off the creativity of others, and then Big Z, who can do a little bit. He can stretch it a little bit. I think those guys are going to be fine. Arkansas still needs a versatile 4, I think. Someone that can help you on the glass, help slide over at the 5, and then maybe add a little more scoring shooting punch facing up. It's a great, you think, well, this time of year, how many guys are out there that are like that? Well, you got guys that are coming back maybe out of the draft today and coming back. They were good enough to check boxes as really good college players to even be invited to draft combines and be in a process this late. So there'll be some options there. And again, there's some frontline options. We've gone through them. There's some other names out there. I've had people asking me about KK and some I don't remember who it was, but somebody tweeted out a prediction of KK Robinson to Arkansas. Well, I didn't think that was very likely. And then DJ Wagner commits. I've checked in with KK a couple of times. He's told me he hasn't talked to Arkansas. I'm also hearing, not from him, but I've heard that, it may be that he turns around and stays at Little Rock. So maybe there's some more NIL money for him there. But I just wanted to address the KK Robinson thing, former Hog, former Aggie, had a really good year, first team All Ohio Valley Conference last year, and helped lead Little Rock to the conference title in the regular season. Someone's saying, I hope KK stays at Little Rock. So you've got a lot of stuff at play here. I go back to what's on the board. If Coleman Hawkins returns to school, Arkansas needs to be in the mix there. I think they will be. I don't have anything telling me that it will be Arkansas if he comes back to school. I just think that he'll be heavily in play there, and keep an eye on it. Does he stay in the draft? I'm not certain of that. Like I said, I think it's more than a cracked door that he'll come back. I think the door's a little more ajar than just that. I throw in Trevon Brazile. Doesn't make a ton of sense to me for a lot of reasons, and then for other reasons, as others have stated, and a source I talked to last night, they think Arkansas would be a good fit for him under Calipari. I don't know. I threw out some other names for that. All right, so talking about some of the high school guys, I want to do that. We talked about Will Raleigh. You guys know I've spent the last 2 weekends. I've talked some about it, but I've spent the last 2 weekends on the Adidas circuit, then on the Nike circuit. I've interviewed the top 5 players in the country based on, if you look at the composite rankings and most of the individual rankings, and then some. But I'm really intrigued by a lot of these players and where this process could be going under Calipari, because we're going to get all wrapped up in portal talk, and we're still there because of today, obviously. And then today's not going to solve everything as far as we'll hear announcements, but then guys are going to be having to set up visits more than likely. I mean, you could have situations where guys off Zoom meetings decide to commit. That's happened before out of the portal. But I suspect we're going to have to wait a little longer, maybe on some things to shake out. I don't know for sure on that. But having said that, you've still got the early period for the future of your program coming up. And so visits, these building of relationships, a lot of that's already happened when Calipari was at Kentucky. But he's got a bit of a reset now on some of this, not in terms of building the relationship, but getting guys to come visit Arkansas. And so we've seen one high school player from the 2025 class, Darius Acuff Jr. By the way, 5-star nationally top 10 rated guy, 6'3" point guard at IMG Academy by way of Detroit. He was not at Nike EYBL over the weekend. Why? Because he was for Team USA camp, where he made the 18-man roster that's going to compete in the junior nationals this summer, and had an outstanding showing. Had a really good showing, a really strong showing. And now you just wonder, Arkansas seems like it's in the mix of about 4 or 5 schools. Maybe it's down to a couple of schools, and Arkansas is one of them. But Darius Acuff Jr. has already been on campus. Who else will be next? Everyone I talked to, from AJ DeBonsa, the number 1 player, 6'9" combo forward out of Prolific Prep in California, plays for the Oakland Soldiers on Nike EYBL. He's talked about interest in Arkansas, Calipari being there and visiting. You go down the list. Cameron Boozer, second-rated player, another 6'8", 6'9" guy. Everybody knows who the Boozer twins are. Probably a package deal. Caden, the 6'4" guard, his brother. Both of them have Arkansas as the school's recruiting them the hardest. And no higher, maybe no lower, based on what Cameron told me, than some of the other top options right now. So I'm not sure what to make of that. I got a feeling he's got a better idea than that, but that's what he told me. But another, second-rated player in the country, number 3, Darren Peterson on the Adidas circuit, told me that he'd already visited Kentucky. He said, Cal, it's going to be the same with Cal no matter where he's at. I've heard several players say that. He's talking about visiting Arkansas. In the composite, number 4, Malik Thomas, 6'4" guard out of Pittsburgh. He lit up when he was talking about Cal, and he said he couldn't guarantee for sure where things were going to land, but he had interest in Arkansas and Cal and taking a visit. Koa Pete, the number 5 player in the country, 6'8" strongman forward on the Adidas circuit. Same kind of discussion. Arkansas is in the picture. We talked about Will Riley. Arkansas was not even in Will Riley's top 10 or final 10. And when he narrowed it down to 5, Calipari had just been hired. He told me in my interview that he talked to Calipari. He said, Malik Thomas and Will Riley both said the early conversations after he got the job, Malik Thomas says maybe the same day or the next day, but Will Riley said obviously something sparked him, because he went from no Arkansas in the top 10 to when he narrowed it to 5, Arkansas was in his final 5. So, another one I really like is Nate Ament. Both he and Will Riley bring that long 6'8", 6'9" perimeter guy that can shoot threes, very cerebral, high floor IQ guys, make all kinds of plays because of their understanding of not only floor spacing, what they are as gravity players, but how to help other players because of their very gifted skill sets. So both guys are similar to me, but Nate Ament, 6'9" out of Virginia, is also talking to Arkansas as another 5-star national top 20 guy. So when I'm now starting to think, okay, when do we start seeing more visits? Darius Acuff Jr., okay. Caleb Wilson, who I didn't talk about. I didn't get to see him on the Nike YBL circuit. Also at Team USA camp. Also been selected as one of the 18 members that they cut it down to. So a lot of guys that have expressed a strong interest in Arkansas. You're talking top 10 players, top 20 players, all of these. And then we move out of that group and we start looking at the Arkansas kids. It has been really quiet. There's been some initial outreach, not a ton of gravity, not a ton of momentum, on that, other than Arkansas coaches were out to see during the live period. Arkansas coaches did put eyes on. When I was there at Adidas, Terrion Burgess, who, by the way, boarded a flight last night, 2 days at Adidas mini camp in Atlanta, boarded a flight for Europe. And so I think June 1st through the 4th, he'll be participating in the Adidas Euro League. The top players from the Adidas circuit, some of the top players from international play, multiple future NBA draft picks. I mentioned Darren Peterson; he's one of those that'll be there. But Terrion Burgess, 6'9" combo forward out of Benton, 17U Arkansas Hawks, national number 36 according to 247 Sports, a 4-star. Averaged a double-double. Had a double-double every game out at the Adidas event that I was at just over a week ago. Played only one game in the Adidas event before the mini camp, and had a 20-point game for the Hawks, and then they shut him down. But keep him fresh. I mean, he's had the mini camp to follow the actual Adidas event through Memorial Day weekend, and then the flight over for participating in EuroLeague. Okay, so he's shown very well. Again, Calipari and Bruiser Flint, who's going to be on Arkansas staff, or is on Arkansas staff, were courtside to watch him play when I was there at Adidas. And then you start moving to some of the other Arkansas kids in the class of 2025. Cortland Muldrew at Springdale Harbor has blown up. He has been great. He was great last season in high school basketball in Arkansas. The times I watched him play, was just brilliant. You started to see him get, like Ole Miss was his first high major offer. I reported, I had a source told me that even Kentucky, when Calipari was there, one of the assistant coaches, one who, by the way, didn't follow Cal to Arkansas, had inquired about him. And then you saw when the spring started, this guy's just been dominant. Over the EYBL session I was just at, over 23 points per game for Team Thad. And this is a good team. I mean, it was one of the top teams on the circuit this spring. When you look at all the sessions, 4 sessions, I think Team Thad finished or was up there in the top 3 for most of it. And it's a deep league. And so he was the driving force in that. Class of 2025 has been rated outside the top 100. He is going to make a huge climb in the rankings. How far, I don't know. But, man, I mean, based on what he's done, he's, to me, a sense as a top 50 player. And then we just see how good it can be. But he's 6'3". He looks leaner to me. He may have even grown just a little bit more than the start of the high school season. He looks a little leaner and a little bit taller. He's strong. But, man, a gifted offensive player, and I'm starting to see him really plug in defensively. Haven't always seen that from him. But, man, Cortland Muldrew, keep an eye on him. I think Arkansas has some level of interest there based on something Cortland told me. I'm not going to share all of it right now. He told me to sit on that. But there is some Arkansas interest. I did report that Arkansas has shown some interest in him. I did tweet that, but I can't say more on the specifics on that. But it was maybe a little bit encouraging. All right, Isaiah Seeley, a top 50 rated player out of Springdale. Muldrew and Seeley were teammates at Springdale before Muldrew moved on to Springdale Harbor. Well, they're teammates again this spring, playing for Team Thad, and Seeley just had a 20-point game to close out the session with Team Thad. The game I saw both of them play parts of 2 games. And Seeley made some outstanding plays, but a guy that's also got multiple high major offers. I mentioned Muldrew's just picked up, LSU, Colorado, Oklahoma, West Virginia, several offers in the last several days. Seeley's had several offers as well from high major schools. He's not splashing as big right now as Muldrew, but he's been a name that's been out there in the top 50th rated guy. But another player that maybe Arkansas keeps an eye on. So you've got 3 players in that 2025 class that check that box for me in terms of what a Calipari might take more than just a passing glance at. We know he's already heavy. I've gone through all these names of these top-level 5-star guys. But, man, if you go back historically in Arkansas's program, I don't care who the coach is, even Nolan Richardson, there were times where the talent in the state wasn't what it is now, and you understood more why he was dipping into Memphis and some of the other areas. And he didn't really miss on big names in the state. It's different now here, and it's been proven over time that Arkansas's best teams, sometimes their best players, most of the time their best players are Arkansas kids. Doesn't mean you brought the greatest recruiter of all. That's a game changer, right? It doesn't mean that the same premises will hold true, but they just might. They're worth taking a look at for sure. I'm not going to tell John Calipari what he should do. I'm not on a level of, are we talking about disappointment that there's not more activity there or anything like that? We're not to that point yet. I mean, he hasn't been on the job long enough, in my opinion, to have any expectations like that. However, I do think there's guys that are going to be in the SEC. They're good enough to not only play in the SEC but excel in the SEC that are in this state right now. And, might be a good idea to take a hard look at them. So we'll see what happens there. But I mentioned the 2025 kids. Let's go to 2026. J.J. Andrews, the 6'6" wing. He is a 5-star. National number 13 5-star according to ESPN. 6'6" wing at a Little Rock Christian Academy. 2-time 4A state champion now. Was the state title game MVP back in March. But I got to see him play at the Nike E16 event. Same thing as EYBL, just he's on the 16U level class of 2026 on Brad Bill Elite's E16 squad. In the game I saw him, he had 15 points, 13 rebounds, a couple of blocks, an assist, a steal. Would have had 5 or 6 assists, but guys couldn't finish some wide open shots he gave them. That happens in basketball. So you don't get credit for making a great pass in terms of getting the assist if the shot isn't made. But he had the point is he had a great all around floor game. He's explosive. He's strong. And he is built and he's quick and he is a team player. So he's not chasing stats. He's not chasing points. He's going out there to win plays. And that's why you see those rebounding numbers. He had a lot of big rebounding games like that in high school last year. At the 4A level, you're going, well, where does that translate? It's translating against high-level competition on the Nike E circuit. Big time. Outstanding performance. Jake Lanier, 6'6" guard, who I think is underrated. National number 33, 4-star. I think he's got 5-star stuff in him. I've said that for a while. I've said that about Trevon Brazile. There's 5-star qualities to some of these guys. But with Lanier playing for Mocan Elite, another one of the more prominent programs there for Nike consistently out of Kansas. He's the second leading scorer next to the Montnati kid who has been a 5-star that the previous Arkansas staff have recruited. Both of them have been on campus together. I've tweeted out a photo of those two together. But Montnati's the leading scorer. Lanier does a little bit of everything, but he's the second leading scorer on a loaded Mocan Elite team. The game I saw him, he sparked a 14-0 run against a very good Vegas Elite team that just ended that game in the second half. It was over. It was tight. He ended it. It was a 14-0 run, and that was it. It was too much of a hill to climb for the opponent. He had 3 threes in that stretch, had a steal, forced another turnover, had an assist on a 3, and then had a nice drive into the paint. Finally, defense ran him off the 3 line. He drove left right in the middle of the paint. But he didn't get just to an easy pull-up. Big man closed on him, and it was just a subtle ball fake. And then he kind of stepped under and around him and a little floater. He's got his shooting stroke is it's a thing of beauty. He's got all the tools. He's got great plus arm length at 6'6". He can play the 1. He can play the 2. He can play the 3. He needs to get stronger. But here's a guy that I'm telling you, man, these Arkansas kids, these are players. The 5 names I mentioned from 2025 and 2026, there are a lot more. 2026 is deep. There's a ton of D1 guys. Aiden Chronister is another one that's getting a lot of high major looks. Plays for AAO flight on the Next Pro 16 circuit. Out of Rogers. He's out of Rogers. He's going to play at Sunrise Christian. That's where we know that's where Layden Blocker played, and a lot of the big-time players go on one of those national independent schools. So there's a lot of guys in Arkansas 2025, 2026. But the 5 names I really focus on and guys that I've seen play now up close and personal, again, over the last 2 weeks against the best competition in the country. These guys, if they want to stay in the SEC, they're going to be able to pick it. They're going to be able to pick and choose there. Maybe they go elsewhere. But the point is, they're good enough to be Razorbacks. We'll see what John Calipari's process is, where he falls on that. He did say in his introductory press conference, hey, if they're good enough, we're going to recruit them. And he actually said it starts here. Well, so again, I'm not doing this. I'm not going through all this to lay it down as a challenger again to express some kind of guff about this. Let's see. We're still early in everything. What I'm saying is, though, I'm telling you because you guys trust me, and I've called it before. And on the Arkansas kids, I don't get over my skis. I tell you what's real. These are really good players in this state. They're going to plug in and make impacts somewhere. And I can't say across the board all of them are going to have great careers. I can't predict that, but some will for certain. All right. So we've gone through a lot here. We've gone through some of the high school stuff. I thought it was important to hit some of that just because you've got the early period coming up. We've gone through some of these potential. Obviously, some stay or go decisions will be made today. Potential that some guys come back to college, and then potential for some of that to open up for the Razorbacks and John Calipari. We're going to sign off now. We made it 50 minutes in. I'm going to keep it under an hour. I want to thank you again for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. If you haven't already, please go hit subscribe, like, share. But until next time, and if something breaks, I'm going to come back and do live again. If something happens today, we're going live. Whenever it is, and we may come back every morning early for the next few days and just kind of hit some talking points on what might be on the horizon. But until next time, we'll see you then.